The LA Kings are a good hockey team who are looking to become a real Stanley Cup contender. Eddie Garcia of Locked On LA Kings is here to discuss the offseason and the keys to the success of the LA Kings for 2023-2024. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. And you can also see us now on, or hear us now on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just do a search for Locked On NHL. The LA Kings are a team looking to become an elite Stanley Cup contender. Eddie Garcia, the host of Locked On LA Kings, joins us to discuss the team's offseason. Eddie, your overall feeling about this offseason, do you think the team took a step forward?
I'm hopeful that they did, but I'm not sure. They certainly made an addition by subtraction, but something that was necessary to do. The big trade obviously was, I would say, this side of the Erik Karlsson deal to Pittsburgh. The biggest trade this offseason was getting Pierre-Luc DuBois from the Winnipeg Jets. But to get him, they had to give up 3 players off their NHL roster plus a second-round pick. So they definitely paid a big price. But they feel like that down the middle now that they are as strong as any team in the NHL with Anze Kopitar, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Philip Deneau, and Blake Lizotte as their fourth-line center, a real energy guy that's kind of underrated. But their depth has definitely taken a hit. And the one thing that you just can't control and have no way of predicting is injuries. If this team, and look, injuries are always a big part of any success for any team, but in particular, a team like the Kings, because of the depth they've now lost, they're going to have to, if there's any significant injuries, they're going to have some difficult time plugging some holes. If it's somebody that's really important that misses a lot of time, they're going to have to really kind of tread water, hopefully get healthy and be healthy at the right time. But if they do feel like they've made a significant move that is going to be a difference maker for the Kings, because the last 2 years, they've made it to the playoffs. Maybe 2 years ago, a little bit ahead of schedule. I think last year was kind of the target of get back in the playoffs. But they've lost to Edmonton in the first round twice. Edmonton is pretty much the same team, which we all think is going to be a good team. You've got the Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights in your division as well, who should still be a good team. Seattle, maybe an emerging power, not sure. But I think the Kings felt like they needed to do something bold, go out and change things up to make themselves better and not just be status quo and hope that they could get over the hump this time. So they did it with a pretty bold move in getting Pierre-Luc Dubois. So they're hopeful that this is going to be the thing that gets them out of the first round and hopefully beyond. But I like, as a fan, initially I was a little bit skeptical about it. I did a little bit more research on Pierre-Luc Dubois. I feel a little bit more comfortable about him now, although I'd heard all the things that a lot of people heard as well about him being a malcontent and a guy who has one foot out the door all the time. But his numbers have still been good. So if he plays this way, being unhappy, getting an 8-year deal and getting a huge contract to play in Los Angeles, arguably a better team than he's ever played on, maybe those numbers go up. Maybe he's a happy camper now, and maybe that's a factor. But I like the Kings being bold, making a move to try and get them over the top, rather than, well, let's just go with the same group again and see if we get a different result.
Where do you see Dubois fitting into the lineup? Who do you think will be, if he's your second-line center, who are his wingers?
I think they're going to want to go with Victor Arvidsson and Kevin Fiala on the second line. That's a pretty strong second line. You could even argue maybe that's the de facto number one line. The top line will be Anze Kopitar, Adrian Kempe, who's a 40-goal scorer and has emerged as a real star. And the other wing is a guy named Quentin Byfield, who people may be aware of as a guy who was the number 2 overall pick in 2020. Really high expectations. He hasn't hit those expectations numbers-wise at all. And when you look at the player that was drafted behind him, Tim Stützle, who's turned out to be one of the better players of the Ottawa Senators, A lot of Kings fans wringing their hands over, well, we should have got this guy. But Byfield just turned 21. He's still really young and raw. And I think a lot of people who are, I don't want to say in the know, because he may not work out, but a lot of people still feel like he may never be a Tim Stützle, but he can still be a really good NHL caliber player. They moved him to the wing last year. They put him on the top line, and the top line of Kopitar, Kempe, and Byfield. Kempe and Byfield had their best stretch of the season with Byfield on there playing with them. So some people are debating, was it just in spite of him or because of him? What was he really doing to help out? He kind of became more of a forechecker, kind of a guy to get in there and start the play, but he didn't really finish a lot of plays, but the other guys did. So it did seem like he had a positive effect on that top line. It looks like he'll be there again, and hopefully they can replicate what they did later in the season with Byfield going forward.
How about the goaltending? How confident are you, and what do you see the roles being for each goaltender?
I think I'm relatively confident, considering that going into this season, they're better off than they were last season. And of course, last year they made it all the way to the Stanley Cup playoffs. And we're pretty much in contention for that second, third spot in the Pacific all season long. But they have Cam Talbot, who came over from Ottawa a couple years ago, had a really strong season in Minnesota. They're hoping he can replicate those numbers on a bit of a better team with a better defensive unit in front of him. And then you've got Phoenix Copley, who saved the Kings season last year, a career AHL guy who got an opportunity through a couple other guys, Cal Peterson and Jonathan Quick, not getting the job done. And he ran with it. He did an amazing job. Now his numbers won't blow you out of the water, but he did what the Kings needed. He was making the saves that needed to be made. Is he spectacular? No. Is he going to rob a lot of guys of goals? No. But is he going to stop the shots he sees and be really just solid? Yes. And that was good enough for the Kings. His winning percentage, I believe, was second or third in the entire NHL, only to Linus Ullmark, who won the Vezina Trophy. So if stats are important and they tell part of the picture, but I think what is the greatest stat? It's winning, and they won with him. So I think Cam Talbot is going to be 1A. I think Phoenix Copley will be 1B. If it doesn't work out with Talbot, I think they feel confident that Copley can still get the job done. But in today's NHL, we're seeing more and more. We're seeing more, I guess, less of the Igor Shesterkins and the Andre Vasilevskis. We're seeing more of a tandem in net. We're seeing 1A, 1B guys sharing the net, and they're both older, veteran. I think 36 years old for Cam Talbot. So not much tread left on the tire, but I think there's still enough there that he can get the Kings where they want to be. This season, he's playing on a 1-year deal. So is Phoenix Copley. So they're also playing for another contract next year as well. There's that kind of motivation. So the goaltending for the Kings is not going to blow you away, but I do think it's better going into this season than it was last year. And also last year, the Kings were paying Cal Peterson and Jonathan Quick $10.5 million. They were the highest paid duo in the NHL. Now they're paying Cam Talbot and Phoenix Copley a little over 2.5 million, I think it is, around 2.5 million. So that's very reasonable. They went out and re-signed a defenseman, Vladislav Gavrikov, that they can help make it easier for the goaltenders. So that was a big factor as well.
How about prospects? Any young players you think that will have a role on this team when the season gets underway?
As Kings fans, we're all incredibly excited to see what defenseman Brandt Clarke can do this year in the NHL. Very, very highly thought of prospect, a guy who gives you something on the blue line offensively, which the Kings don't have a lot of those guys. So we're excited about that. Last year, for people who don't know, he got his 8-9 game run with the Kings before they sent him off to junior. Eventually went and played for Team Canada, won a gold medal at the World Junior Championships. And then he went to his OHL team and he had 61 points in 31 games as a defenseman. So he did some really amazing things. So I feel pretty confident he'll start the year with the Kings. There's a chance, depending on how the preseason goes, maybe they want to give him a little seasoning in the AHL before calling him up. I don't think so. I think he's ready. I think what he showed last year in his brief sample size with the Kings, he didn't light the world on fire, but he also didn't look overwhelmed as a young kid getting his first taste of the NHL. So I think that was a very encouraging sign. Real confident, real dynamic kind of guy. Just, for him, the only way he's going to learn how to play in the NHL is to play in the NHL, right? He's at that point. I think he's done all he can at the other levels. Yes, he hasn't played professionally amongst men in the AHL. Maybe they want to give him a little bit of that, but at some point he's going to be on the Kings this season. And again, he's a guy who, and you don't have to play him in your top two pairings. You can put him on the third pairing. He can learn and still have a positive impact. And he'll probably quarterback their second power play unit because Sean Durzi left to go to the Arizona Coyotes, which he did that role last year. So there's that aspect that he can contribute offensively, but really excited about offensive defenseman Brandt Clarke.
All right, Eddie, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
It's obviously Locked On LA Kings. I don't know what the other shows are doing, but we're returning to our 5 days a week starting today on Monday. So we're excited about that. Obviously covering everything involving the LA Kings podcast, YouTube at Locked On LA Kings on Instagram and on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days. And if anybody wants to follow me personally, I'm at Eddie on Fox on Twitter.
Eddie, thanks so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you here.
I enjoyed it. Thanks, Gil. Looking forward to the season.
Today's episode is brought to you by AG1, a product I literally use every day. It's a daily foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. I take AG1 before I leave my house for the day. It just gives me a better feeling of health and wellness and just makes me feel energized. And with AG1, you're getting 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all of these things. So, if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, try AG1. You'll get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Just go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL network to check it out.